Have you ever noticed how some people can look you straight in the eye and tell you exactly what you want to hear? How they craft their words so perfectly, their timing so precise, that you walk away feeling like you've just met the most authentic person in the world. And then, weeks or months later, you realize that everything they said was carefully calculated. Every emotion they displayed was performed. Every vulnerability they shared was bait. Maybe you're thinking of someone right now. That friend who always has a crisis that requires your help. That partner who tells you they've changed, that this time will be different. That colleague who presents themselves as your ally while positioning themselves for your downfall. You believed their story because you wanted to believe it, because it felt good, because it gave you hope. But what if I told you that the most dangerous people in your life are not the obvious villains? They're not the ones who scream or threaten or show their darkness openly. The most dangerous people are the ones who have mastered the art of appearing as exactly what you need them to be. And today, we're going to explore how they do it, why it works, and most importantly, how to protect yourself from ever being fooled again. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most of us refuse to accept. He saw that people are not fundamentally good or evil. They are fundamentally self-interested. And the most successful among them have learned to disguise that self-interest behind masks of virtue, concern, and love. This isn't cynicism. This is survival. Because in a world where everyone is telling you their story, the one who learns to read between the lines is the one who stays free. If you've ever felt manipulated, used, or completely blindsided by someone you trusted, this video is for you. If you're tired of being the person others see as an easy target, if you want to develop the kind of inner radar that protects you from deception while still allowing you to connect authentically with others, then stay with me. Because what I'm about to show you will change how you see every interaction for the rest of your life. The theater of false authenticity. Let's start with a truth that cuts deeper than most people are willing to admit. Every human being you encounter is performing, not because they're inherently deceptive, but because survival in social environments requires us to present versions of ourselves that serve our needs. The question isn't whether someone is performing. The question is whether they know they're performing, and whether their performance serves your interests or exploits them. Machiavelli wrote that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. He meant that people respond more to what they see than to what actually is. And the masters of deception understand this completely. They know that perception is reality, and they craft their performances accordingly. Think about the last time someone hurt you deeply. Now think about how they presented themselves in the beginning. I'm willing to bet they showed you exactly what you were looking for. If you needed someone strong, they appeared confident. If you needed someone vulnerable, they shared just enough pain to seem real. If you needed someone reliable, they were there every time you called. This isn't coincidence. This is strategy. The most sophisticated manipulators don't lie about facts. They lie about intentions. They don't fake their entire personality. They amplify the parts of themselves that serve their goals and hide the parts that don't. They become chameleons, shifting their colors to match whatever environment will give them the most advantage. But here's what Machiavelli understood that most people miss. The problem isn't that some people are deceptive. The problem is that most of us are desperate to be deceived. We want to believe that people are who they appear to be because questioning everyone is exhausting. We want to trust because distrust feels lonely. We want to see the best in people because seeing clearly can be devastating. This desperation to believe makes us vulnerable, not because we're stupid, but because we're human. And humans have a psychological need for connection that can override our rational thinking. The manipulator's greatest weapon isn't their ability to lie. It's your need for their lie to be true. Carl Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear in social situations. But he also warned about what happens when we become so identified with our personas that we lose touch with who we really are underneath. The dangerous person is not necessarily someone with a false persona. It's someone who has become so disconnected from their authentic self that they don't even know they're lying anymore. These are the people who can pass lie detector tests while telling you complete fabrications. Not because they're superhuman, but because they've convinced themselves that their story is true. They believe their own performance, and that makes them incredibly convincing because there's no internal conflict to give them away. The architecture of manipulation. Let me show you how this works in practice. The skilled manipulator doesn't start with big lies. They start with small truths. They observe you carefully, noting what you value, what you fear, what you need. Then they begin to present themselves as the solution to your unspoken problems. If you're lonely, they become unusually interested in your life. If you're insecure, they offer validation that feels genuine because it addresses your specific wounds. If you're ambitious, they present opportunities that seem too good to pass up. They don't tell you what they want. They make you want to give it to them. This process happens so gradually that you don't notice it. One day you're meeting someone new, and the next day you realize you've been giving them money, time, emotional energy, or access to your life without really understanding why. You feel confused because you remember making conscious choices, but somehow those choices led you somewhere you never intended to go. Machiavelli called this the difference between the lion and the fox. The lion uses force. Everyone sees the lion coming, but the fox uses cunning. The fox gets what it wants by making you think it was your idea to give it to them. And the fox is far more dangerous because you don't know you're being hunted. The psychological mechanisms that make this possible are fascinating and terrifying. Humans have something called confirmation bias. Once we form an opinion about someone, we tend to look for evidence that supports that opinion and ignore evidence that contradicts it. The manipulator's job is simply to create a positive first impression and then maintain it long enough for your bias to kick in. They also exploit what psychologists call the reciprocity principle. When someone does something nice for you, you feel obligated to return the favor. But here's the manipulation. They don't do something nice and then immediately ask for something back. They do something nice, let you feel grateful, and then much later, when you've forgotten the calculation behind their kindness, they collect their debt. The most sophisticated manipulators also understand emotional contagion. Emotions are literally contagious. When someone around you is calm, you become calmer. When someone is excited, you become excited. They use this by carefully managing their own emotional state to influence yours. They become the emotional thermostat of every interaction, and you don't even realize your feelings are being controlled. But perhaps the most powerful tool they use is something called intermittent reinforcement. This is when good treatment is given inconsistently. Sometimes they're wonderful, sometimes they're distant, sometimes they're cruel, sometimes they're loving. This creates an addiction-like response in your brain. You become focused on getting back to those moments when they were wonderful, and you'll tolerate almost anything to achieve that. The stories people tell. Now let's get specific about the stories that should make you suspicious. Not because everyone who tells these stories is manipulative, but because manipulative people often use these particular narratives because they work. The victim story is one of the most effective. Everyone has hurt me. No one understands me. I've been betrayed so many times. This story is designed to make you want to be the exception, to be the one person who finally treats them right. It triggers your desire to rescue and makes you ignore red flags because you don't want to be another person who hurts them. The reformed bad boy or girl story is another classic. I used to be selfish, but I've learned. I used to hurt people, but now I understand love. This works because it suggests they have experience with darkness, but have chosen light. It makes their attention feel more valuable because they could choose to be destructive, but they're choosing you instead. The misunderstood genius story appeals to people who see themselves as deep thinkers. No one gets my vision. People are too shallow to understand what I'm trying to do. If you consider yourself intelligent or perceptive, you'll want to prove that you're different. You'll want to be the one who understands them. The wounded healer story is particularly effective with empathetic people. I've been through so much pain and now I want to help others heal. This makes their interest in your problems seem altruistic rather than calculating. It makes you feel special to be chosen for their help. But here's what Machiavelli would tell you about all of these stories. It doesn't matter if they're true. What matters is how they're being used. A true story told with manipulative intent is more dangerous than a lie told clumsily, because the truth makes you drop your guard. The question you need to ask isn't, is this person's story true? The question is, why are they telling me this story right now? What response are they trying to create in me? And what do they gain if I respond the way they want? the psychology of self-deception. But here's where this gets really complex. The people who deceive you most effectively are often deceiving themselves too. They're not sitting in dark rooms plotting your downfall. They're telling themselves stories about their own motivations that allow them to act without guilt. The narcissist genuinely believes they love you, even as they're draining your energy for their own needs. They've convinced themselves that what's good for them is good for you too. When they manipulate you, they tell themselves they're helping you become stronger. When they hurt you, they tell themselves you needed to learn a lesson. The codependent person genuinely believes they're being selfless, even as they use your gratitude to feel valuable. They create crises so they can solve them. They keep you dependent so they can feel needed, but they've convinced themselves this is love. The user genuinely believes they're a good person, even as they take advantage of your kindness. They tell themselves they deserve your help because life has been unfair to them. They convince themselves that you're giving freely, even when you're giving because they've manipulated you into feeling guilty if you don't. This self-deception makes them incredibly dangerous because they pass every test you might apply. They seem genuine because they are genuine about their false beliefs about themselves. They show no signs of guilt because they feel no guilt. They can look you in the eye and tell you they love you because they believe their version of love is real. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous enemies are the ones who believe they're your friends, because they'll betray you while feeling righteous about it. They'll hurt you while believing they're helping you. They'll take from you while convinced they deserve it. Reading the unspoken language. So how do you protect yourself? How do you develop the kind of discernment that cuts through performance and sees reality? The answer isn't to become cynical or closed off. The answer is to learn to read what people don't say as clearly as what they do say. Watch their actions over time, not just their words in the moment. Anyone can say they care about you when they need something. The question is, do they care about you when caring requires sacrifice? Do they remember what matters to you when there's nothing in it for them? Do they show up when showing up is inconvenient? Pay attention to how they talk about other people, especially people who can't benefit them. How do they speak about their ex-partners, their former friends, their family members? Because that's how they'll eventually speak about you. The person who badmouths everyone else to you will badmouth you to someone else. Notice what happens when you set a boundary. The person with good intentions will respect your boundary, even if they're disappointed. The person with manipulative intentions will test the boundary, argue with it, make you feel guilty for having it, or find ways around it. Observe how they handle being wrong. Everyone makes mistakes, but how someone responds to being corrected tells you everything about their character. Do they acknowledge the error and adjust? Do they deflect blame? Do they attack you for pointing it out? Do they make you feel bad for making them feel bad? Watch for what psychologists call love bombing. This is when someone overwhelms you with attention, affection, and gifts very early in the relationship. It feels amazing, but it's designed to create emotional dependency before you've had time to evaluate their character. Healthy relationships develop gradually. Manipulative relationships start with intensity. Pay attention to inconsistencies in their stories, not just about facts, but about values. Do they claim to value honesty while lying to other people? Do they say they respect boundaries while pushing yours? Do they talk about loyalty while betraying others' trust? Most importantly, notice how you feel after spending time with them. Not during the interaction, but after. Do you feel energized or drained? Clear or confused? More like yourself or less? Your body often knows what your mind hasn't figured out yet, the mirror of self-knowledge. But here's the part that requires real courage. The reason you're vulnerable to certain types of manipulation isn't just because manipulators are skilled. It's because they're skilled at exploiting specific vulnerabilities in you. And until you understand those vulnerabilities, you'll keep attracting the same kinds of people. If you keep falling for the victim story, ask yourself, what wound in you needs to feel needed? If you keep believing promises of change, ask yourself, what in you is afraid of accepting people as they are? If you keep making excuses for people's bad behavior, ask yourself, what in you is afraid of being alone? The manipulator is like a key, and your vulnerability is like a lock. They can't open doors that don't exist. They can only exploit psychological wounds that are already there. So protecting yourself isn't just about reading other people better. It's about understanding yourself more, deeply. Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The people who manipulate you successfully are often showing you parts of yourself you haven't integrated yet. The needy person exploits your fear of being needed. The controlling person exploits your fear of making your own decisions. The dramatic person exploits your fear of your own emotions. This doesn't mean you're to blame for being manipulated. It means you have the power to become less manipulable. By healing your wounds, you remove the hooks that manipulators use to catch you. By developing your own sense of worth, you become less susceptible to people who offer validation in exchange for control. The wisdom of healthy suspicion. Machiavelli has been misunderstood for centuries. People think he advocated for cruelty and deception, but what he actually advocated for was clear sight. He wanted people to see the world as it is, not as they wish it were. And what he saw was that virtue without wisdom is vulnerability, and trust without discernment is naivety. This doesn't mean you should assume everyone is trying to deceive you. It means you should let people earn your trust over time through consistent actions rather than compelling words. It means you should be curious about people's motivations rather than just accepting their explanations. Healthy suspicion isn't paranoia. Paranoia assumes malicious intent. Healthy suspicion simply reserves judgment until there's evidence. It's the difference between thinking, this person is definitely trying to hurt me, and thinking, I don't know this person's intentions yet, so I'll proceed carefully. The person with healthy suspicion can still love deeply, but they love with their eyes open. They can still trust, but they trust based on patterns of behavior rather than promises. They can still be generous, but they're generous by choice rather than manipulation. Most importantly, they're willing to disappoint people rather than betray themselves, because they've learned that the price of being liked by everyone is being respected by no one, including yourself. Living with clear sight. When you start seeing clearly, several things will happen. Some people in your life will fade away because the relationship was based on your willingness to be deceived. Some people will become angry because they can no longer manipulate you as easily. And some people will respect you more because you're no longer participating in games that diminish both of you. This process can be lonely at first. It's isolating to realize how much of your social world was built on illusions, but it's also liberating. Because when you stop participating in deception, you create space for authentic relationships. When you stop accepting stories that don't match actions, you find people whose stories and actions align. You'll discover that the people worth knowing appreciate your discernment. They're not threatened by your ability to see clearly because they have nothing to hide. They don't need you to be naive because they're not trying to exploit you. The goal isn't to become cold or closed off. The goal is to become someone who can engage with the world fully while maintaining your center. Someone who can love without losing themselves. Someone who can trust without abandoning wisdom. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But I would add, it is better to be respected than needed. It is better to be chosen than trapped. And it is better to be alone with your integrity than surrounded by people who require your blindness to stay close. The freedom of truth. At the end of this journey, what you'll find is not cynicism but freedom. The freedom that comes from no longer needing other people's stories to be true. The freedom that comes from being able to love people as they are, rather than as they pretend to be. The freedom that comes from knowing that your worth doesn't depend on being useful to people who don't value you. You'll learn that the most authentic relationships begin when both people can drop their performances and still choose each other. That the deepest intimacy comes not from believing everything someone tells you, but from seeing who they really are and deciding that person is worth knowing. And you'll discover that when you stop being an easy target, you don't become a victim of the world's cruelty. You become a student of human nature, someone who can navigate complexity with wisdom, who can hold both compassion and boundaries, who can engage with life's dangers while protecting what matters most. The person who never believes anyone's story without verification isn't refusing to trust. They're choosing to trust wisely. They're not closing their heart. They're protecting it so it remains available for people who deserve access to it. This is the ultimate lesson Machiavelli offers us. Not that people are evil, but that people are complex. Not that you should never trust, but that trust should be earned. Not that love is impossible, but that love without wisdom is dangerous. When you integrate this understanding, you become someone who can engage with the world without being consumed by it, someone who can see clearly without becoming bitter, someone who can love deeply without losing themselves, and that might be the most revolutionary act of all. In a world full of people performing their stories, becoming someone who lives their truth. Now tell me in the comments, are you ready to see clearly, even if it changes everything? Are you prepared to value truth over comfort? Because once you start down this path, you can never go back to believing stories simply because you want them to be true. If this video opened your eyes to something you needed to see, share it with someone who might need this message. And remember, the next video in this series goes even deeper into the psychology of influence and how to maintain your autonomy in a world that profits from your confusion. Your freedom is worth the discomfort of truth.